fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
The sour tang of spilled ale and old fear clung to the air in the crow's nest, a tavern that catered to those with secrets to keep and sorrows to drown. My own fear was a cold knot in my stomach, a constant companion for the last 3 weeks. I kept my head down, the hood of my cloak pulled low, but I could still feel his eyes on me from across the room. The angel, that's what he called himself when he cornered me in the market, all ethereal beauty and predatory promises, but I knew what he was. A monster cloaked in light, my hands trembled around my empty mug. This was my last resort. My gaze flickered to the woman behind the bar, Kaylin. Her name was whispered in the city's dark corners, a name synonymous with impossible solutions and terrifying prices. She moved with an unnerving economy of motion, her dark hair tied back in a severe braid that exposed the sharp line of her jaw and a swirl of black ink curling up her neck. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, missed nothing. They swept the room with a practiced, assessing gaze that made me feel stripped bare. I had watched her for an hour, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I watched her hands, calloused and capable, as she wiped down the scarred wooden bar. I imagined those hands holding a weapon, imagined them holding me. I pushed the thought away, heat creeping up my neck. I wasn't here for that. I was here to be saved. Taking a breath that did nothing to calm my nerves, I slid off my stool and approached the bar, moving into the space she commanded. The air around her felt different, charged with a low hum of power. Up close, she smelled of wood smoke, steel, and something wild like a coming storm. She finally turned her gaze on me, and the full force of it stole the air from my lungs. Her eyes weren't just stormy, they were ancient, deep with a knowledge that made my problems feel small and my life feel fragile. I leaned forward, my voice a ragged whisper that was nearly swallowed by the tavern's din. I need an angel shot. Kaylin didn't so much as blink. Her expression remained impassive, but a dangerous light sparked in the depths of her eyes. She held my gaze for a long moment, a silent interrogation that I felt in my very soul. Seemingly satisfied with what she found there, she gave a slow, deliberate nod. She reached beneath the bar, her movements fluid and silent. I expected a bottle, a special concoction. Instead, her hand emerged, grasping the dark, worn wood of a crossbow stock. She placed the weapon on the bar between us with a heavy thud that echoed in the sudden silence of my world. It was a beautiful, lethal thing, carved with runes that seemed to drink the dim light. With her other hand, she produced a single, obsidian black bolt. Holding it between her thumb and forefinger, she whispered a single word in a language I didn't understand, and the tip of the bolt erupted in silent, black fire. The unnatural flame cast flickering shadows across her face, making her look like a goddess of vengeance. She slid the crossbow towards me, her voice a low, gravelly promise. "Point out the angel you need shot." My finger, trembling, lifted and pointed toward the corner booth. There, the man with the silver hair. Kaylin's gaze followed mine, her stormy eyes narrowing. The angel Lucian was holding court, his laughter like chimes, his face a mask of radiant perfection that made the women around him swoon. They didn't see the rot underneath, the faint shimmer of glamour that couldn't quite hide the cruelty in his smile. Kaylin looked from him back to me. "My price is not coin," she stated, her voice a low rumble that vibrated through the wood of the bar and straight into my bones. "When this is done, you owe me a debt. I will call it in when I choose. Do you agree to the terms?" Was I trading one monster for another? Perhaps, but Kaylin's darkness felt like a shield, while Lucian's light was a cage. I met her intense gaze, the black fire from the bolt reflected in her pupils. "I agree. That was all it took." She slung the crossbow over her shoulder in one smooth motion. "He'll run when he sees me move. We go now. Stay close and do exactly as I say." She moved from behind the bar and the crowd parted for her as if by instinct. I scrambled to keep up, her dark cloak swirling around her like a piece of the night sky. The moment we stepped out of the tavern, the relative warmth was snatched away, replaced by the biting wind of the city's cobbled alleys. The moon hung overhead, a sliver of bone in an inky sky. Lucian was already moving, a silver-haired wraith slipping through the labyrinth of the old town. Kaylin was a shadow at his heels, and I was a panting, terrified mess trying to keep her in my sights. "He knows this territory," she murmured, not even out of breath as we took a sharp turn, the rough brick scraping my shoulder. She grabbed my arm to steady me, and a jolt of pure heat shot through me at her touch, a startling contrast to the cold fear coiling in my gut. Her fingers were strong, a grounding presence in the chaos. "He's leading us to a killing ground." The thought should have terrified me more, but with Kaylin's hand on my arm, her presence a solid wall of power beside me, I felt a strange sense of security. Followed him into the ruins of an old cathedral, a place where the roof had long since collapsed, leaving the nave open to the judging eyes of the stars. Lucian stood in the center by the shattered remains of an altar and turned to face us. He was no longer smiling. The little hunter, he purred, his voice losing its melodic charm and taking on a grating, ethereal echo. And you've brought a stray. The glamour around him dissolved like smoke, his form elongated, his skin paling to iridescent white. Vast feathery wings, not of white but of oily, shifting shadow, unfurled from his back, scraping against the broken stone. And we were not alone. From the darkened archways and shattered confessionals, other figures emerged. Their eyes glowed with the same cold, malevolent light. We were surrounded. Kaelin shoved me behind her, the crossbow appearing in her hands as if from thin air. The black-flamed bolt was already notched and aimed at Lucian's heart. "I told you to stay close," she growled, her body a tense, unyielding line in front of mine. The world exploded into a maelstrom of sound and shadow. Kaelin loosed the first bolt, and it flew with an unnatural silence, a streak of black fire against the gloom. It struck one of the lesser angels in the chest, and the creature didn't scream. It simply dissolved into a cloud of shrieking dust and fading light. Lucian hissed, a sound like tearing silk, and launched himself into the air, his shadow wings beating a wind that stank of ozone and decay. Kaelin moved like a dancer in a storm of her own making. She was magnificent. She spun and fired, loading new bolts with a speed that seemed impossible. Each shot found its mark, each bolt of black fire a sentence of oblivion. She was not just a hunter, she was a force of nature, an executioner wielding the night itself. I huddled behind a fallen pillar, trying to make myself small, useless. One of the creatures broke past her guard, its face a blur of too many eyes and a jaw that unhinged like a serpent's. It lunged for me, claws like obsidian knives extended. I screamed, scrambling backward, my foot catching on a loose stone. I fell hard, pain lancing up my arm as it hit the unforgiving floor. The angel was on me in an instant, its weight crushing, its foul breath washing over my face. Just as its claws descended, a dark shape slammed into its side. It was Kaelin. She had abandoned her crossbow, a wicked-looking dagger now in each hand. She drove one into the creature's neck, the other into its chest. It spasmed, its glowing eyes fixing on her with pure hatred before it disintegrated. Kaelin stood over me, chest heaving, her face spattered with motes of fading angelic light that looked like cursed stars, but the fight had taken its toll. A deep gash ran along her arm, and another angel, Lucian's second, took advantage of her distraction. It came from behind, a silent blade of shadow. "Kaelin, look out," I shrieked. She turned, but not fast enough. The blade sliced across her ribs. She grunted in pain, stumbling back, but her hand shot out, catching the creature's wrist. With a brutal twist, she snapped its arm and drove her dagger into its throat. Finally, there was silence, broken only by our ragged breaths. Lucian was gone. He had fled when the fight turned against him. Kaelin swayed on her feet, one hand pressed to her bleeding side. I scrambled up, my own pain forgotten. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," she rasped, but the lie was plain on her face. Her skin was pale, a fine sheen of sweat on her brow. I tore a strip of cloth from the hem of my tunic. "Let me see." I reached for her, my hand surprisingly steady. My touch was hesitant as I pressed the cloth against the wound on her arm. Her skin was hot, feverish. She watched me, her stormy eyes unreadable, her guard down for the first time. The air between us was thick with the metallic scent of blood and something else, something fragile and intense. When I finished a clumsy bandage, my eyes met hers. She was looking at me with a raw, aching vulnerability that cracked her hardened exterior wide open. "Why?" she whispered, her voice rough with pain. "Why did you warn me?" Her question hung in the air, a confession of a life spent alone, a life where no one ever watched her back. Before I could answer, her knees buckled. I caught her, her weight heavy against me, her head slumping against my shoulder. Her breathing was shallow, and for the first time, the legendary hunter felt terrifyingly, mortally human in my arms. Getting Kaelin back to the tavern was a nightmare. She was a dead weight, leaning heavily on me, each step a clear agony for her. I half-dragged her up the rickety stairs to the small apartment above the crow's nest, my body screaming with a chorus of its own aches and bruises. Her rooms were sparse, clean, and smelled of her, that scent of smoke, steel, and storm. It was a warrior's space, not a home. I managed to get her to the bed, her armor and leather groaning in protest. "The water," she rasped, gesturing toward a small basin, "and the green jar on the shelf." I found a salve that smelled of herbs and something faintly magical. My hands shook as I worked open the clasps of her leather armor, my fingers brushing against the damp linen of her tunic underneath. Her skin was fever-hot. I gently cut away the cloth around the wound on her ribs. It was a nasty cut, deep and weeping a faint, golden ichor. Angel poison. I cleaned it as best I could, my touch as gentle as I could make it. Kaelin was silent, her eyes closed, but I knew she was awake. I could feel the tension in her body, the rigid control she was exerting over her own pain. After I applied the salve and bound the wound tightly, I sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted. Her eyes opened, finding mine in the dim light filtering through the grimy window. You're a terrible nurse, she murmured, a ghost of a smile touching her lips, but you're still here. You saved my life, I said, my voice quiet. I owed you a debt, remember. The debt was yours to repay on my terms, she countered, her voice gaining a little strength. Not for you to throw yourself in front of a blade for me. Maybe I'm setting my own terms. The air shifted, the space between us shrinking until it was filled with a humming, dangerous energy that had nothing to do with angels or violence. It was the same charged current I'd felt at the bar, but 1,000 times more potent. She reached out, her calloused fingers tracing the line of my jaw, her touch surprisingly soft. It left a trail of fire on my skin. Lucian will not forget this, she said, her thumb stroking my cheek. He will hunt you now, you're tied to my world, to me. Is that a threat or a promise? I whispered, leaning into her touch, my heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat. Her stormy eyes darkened. Both. She pulled me closer, her other hand coming up to tangle in my hair. The pain she was in seemed to vanish, replaced by a desperate, raw hunger that mirrored my own. I wasn't just grateful to her. I was drawn to her, to the power that emanated from her like heat, to the broken pieces inside her that I recognized because they matched my own. When her lips met mine, it wasn't gentle. It was a collision, a desperate claiming. It tasted of blood and pain and the herbal salve on my fingers. It was the most honest kiss I had ever known. I melted into her, my hands moving from her face to her shoulders, feeling the hard muscle beneath her tunic. The world of monsters and shadows outside this room ceased to exist. There was only the heat of her mouth, the solid presence of her body, and the overwhelming feeling of finding a safe harbor in the heart of a storm. As dawn began to paint the dirty window with streaks of gray and rose, a thunderous crash echoed from the tavern below, the main door splintering. Kaylin broke the kiss instantly, every line of her body snapping back into lethal focus. Her hand was already on the dagger she kept under her pillow. Our eyes met over the small space between us, the intimacy of the last few hours clashing with the sudden, violent intrusion. They found us, she said, her voice a low, deadly growl, and in her eyes I saw it again, not a threat but a promise.